Every day is great because God is in it. Welcome to another Friday episode. My name is Nike Ayola and this is my channel, Ask Pastor Nike. Now, I got a lot of interesting feedback from the last episode and I just think it's appropriate for me to share some of the lessons and views that these comments expressed. You will recall that in the last video I said physical punishment should be a last resort. And so what are some of the options that parents have as alternatives to physical discipline? In this video, episode 29, I'll be talking about some of these alternatives and how to manage our parent-child relationships as well as the interpersonal relationships between our children. Now, let's just tackle the subject head-on. What are some alternatives to spanking our children that can help with bonding while at the same time give them control in choosing the right behavior? Number one is talking, and I mean talking to and with them. I bet we hear it all the time that negotiation is better than altercation, particularly in human relations. And though we may not be negotiating with our kids, especially when they're young, we know that to jaw is always better than to war. Now, God, whose ways are far higher than ours, is willing to reason with us as well. The first part of Isaiah chapter 1 and verse 18 is very explicit because it says, "Come now, let's discuss this, says the Lord." The God of heaven is open to dialogue with us, his children, as we also should be, especially when dealing with our older children. Find out from your child why they did that wrong thing, and then also be ready to explain why the action was wrong, as well as the possible repercussions they may be burdened with in the future. Talking with them might just be the gate opener to whatever underlying issues there are, if there are any. And yes, you may have done it many times before, but you should still be ready to do it again. Remember, love is patient. Number two is the withdrawal of privileges. And this will get the attention of most teenagers where nothing else works. And it should range from outright retrieval of something like maybe an electronic device or restriction of access, like limiting the time spent on the internet or moving curfew time backwards. It could also be a reduction or suspension of their allowances, that is if you give them periodic allowance. If, however, your family style is to tie the allowance to assigned chores, it might not be equitable for you to suspend the allowance if they are still carrying out those chores. Some parents use a point system, where every offense reduces your points by so much, and what you get as your allowance depends on how many points you have left. The bottom line is that it has to involve something that will make your child pay a price. Let me issue a word of caution here. Please remember that the punishment must match the offense, and it goes both ways. An inconsequential punishment for a truly nefarious act is an invitation to do it again, while a heavy punishment for a minor offense has the danger of hardening the child's sensitivity. Number three is to enforce a payback of some sort, especially to the aggrieved person. What I mean is this: you hold your child accountable by making him or her do something good for whoever was impacted by their bad behavior. And this could be a sibling, a friend, a school authority, or even yourself. You can even make them do the most undesirable chores that nobody ever volunteers to do. This alternative can be quite humbling and will make them never desire to repeat the act. One interesting style of curbing indiscipline that a special sister of mine shared with me is what I want to lay out next. If your children are in the habit of leaving their stuff around carelessly and you're tired of talking to them about it, you can just stop yelling and spanking them and try this instead. Every item that is left lying around or that is not in its proper place goes straight to jail. And this includes all personal items like shoes, cell phones, and books, and so on. In any case, whatever item you incarcerate has to be something consequential to your child. For example, most kids will be pleased if their homework was jailed. Then your child will have to pay the set bail amount in order to get them back. And it will be more effective if the bail amount is graduated, like different amounts for a first offense and then for repeated infractions. So go ahead and jail their shoes that have become obstacle crossing around the house, and they will quickly learn compliance with your instructions after paying the fines a couple of times. Number four will especially work for mothers. You can use their father as a leverage, and that will work beautifully if there is a measure of all that you have helped to cultivate around him, the father that is. And if you as the mom haven't formed the habit of threatening to report every minor offense to their dad. As mothers, The proximity we often enjoy with our kids sometimes makes them take our authority for granted. I'm sure you've heard the phrase, familiarity breeds contempt, many times already. Most children hate to disappoint a loving and sacrificing dad. So when you look at that child soberly and say, "I'm sorry, but I have to tell your dad about this," something, a shifting is bound to happen in their hearts. This is, however, one leverage you have to use very sparingly to ensure its effectiveness. Now, let's talk a little bit about some ways to help your kids manage their interpersonal relationships. I believe that sibling rivalry and future animosity towards each other, our children, can be avoided if we pay attention to and try some of these suggestions. First and foremost is this: don't take sides if there is an issue between your kids, even when you know who is right or wrong. What you want to do is to draw them together, not alienate them from each other, and taking sides will usually do just that. Constantly blaming one person, even if they are in the wrong more frequently, will make that child give up trying. He or she will conclude they can't please you anyway, so why bother? Also, it is grievous injustice to come to a conclusion over any matter based on antecedents. Make sure to hear every side before trying to broker peace. That way, even the younger knows he or she has a fighting chance. Whenever you have to settle a quarrel or misunderstanding between your children, you must make them know that you love each one of them specially. And this brings me to the bad attitude of having favorites if you are blessed with more than one child. Playing favoritism is a guaranteed way of ensuring lack of cohesion among your children. A parent's heart is inelastic enough to love all his or her children equally. And yes, you may love them differently, but you must be known to love them equally. Each one of your kids should be convinced they are your favorite for you to be regarded as a successful parent, in my opinion. And then, don't play the superiority of sex game that is so prevalent among African families. Each child is precious, irrespective of their sex. Secondly, you should make your children know that they are responsible for each other. Help them to understand right from the beginning that they must never be in competition with each other. No, and that those who achieve earlier success must be willing to help any one of them who is struggling. And while I'm not saying that the comfortable ones should become enablers of others who are not pulling their weight, we all must understand that no one individual succeeds alone or solely by their own efforts. I strongly advise that you cover your children with prayers that each one of them will be successful without having to depend on the other. There's an anonymous quote I saw a while back that I'd like to repeat here, and it says, "Before you impress the street, make sure nobody is hungry in your family." Help your older children understand that seniority confers both rights and responsibilities, and then try to share gifts and opportunities as equitably as possible so you don't make the younger ones feel like they are permanently disadvantaged. And again, under this point, make sure you pay attention to your younger children. If you have an already established tradition that the older children have had to go through, make sure you enforce it with the younger children as well. If you feel the need to discontinue the tradition for whatever reason, you at least owe the older children an explanation. Parents are usually relaxed when it comes to their youngest. Maybe because, they've run out of steam, or because they are better informed later on in life. Your older children should know what has changed and why, so they don't start feeling you care more about their younger siblings than you do for them. These are some of the things that are capable of creating resentments in their hearts towards their brothers and sisters. Finally, do not compare your kids with each other, publicly or privately. And don't compare your kids with other people's children either. Some of our children are early starters, while some are late bloomers. Even twins may not be completely alike. So statements like, "Why can't you be like your brother or your sister?" is capable of damaging the amity that should naturally exist between siblings. And constantly repeating one child's success or prowess to the others might make them desire the failure of that child secretly. And if your star child unfortunately falls from your pedestal in the future, you can be certain he or she will get no sympathy from the siblings. And you don't compare your own kids with other people's children because you never get to hear the whole story. People only present the side of the story that favors them. Nobody will willingly tell you the downside of their own children, so you should never be quick to challenge your kids based on what you heard. If you are fond of praising children other than yours, you will make them, that is your kids, feel you don't value them, and they will come up with all kinds of excuses to avoid you in the future or even stop sharing their good news with you altogether. Remember to always pray for friendship and unity among your children. Praying will never go out of style or become overrated. Now, the credits for a lot of the suggestions in this episode go to my sister and fellow pastor's wife, Doyin Afoja, to my big sister by both natural blood and the most superior blood of Christ, Remi Akiniroyin, and my first book, Don't Ruin Their Lives, Taking Responsibility for Your Child's Future, that is available on Amazon and these other outlets listed in my link tree that is on the screen right now. See you in another week. Shalom.